So we got a chance to go over the polygraph here, and I was over there watching as you were typing in questions. Some of you asked really interesting questions. Some of you just happened to land on the right answer right away. So let's see, this was Ryan and Jared. Who's Ryan and Jared? Where are you at? One question, well done, that's a world record. Is it a square? Yes, done. So we're gonna talk about this, not this in particular, but we're gonna be talking about different quadrilaterals. And so as Ms. Jaime said, you're gonna need your notes that you've had. We're gonna be leaning on those heavily. And as we move into that, I need for you to open up a new tab and go to joinpd.com. I'll put the link up here to be able to do that. It is right there. It may be hard to see, so it's joinpd.com, and you're going to be prompted to put in a code. So you can move away from the polygraph and into Pear Deck. On your screen, you should see a slide that says quadrilateral shenanigans. If you see that, go ahead and give your partner a fist bump, a little high five. Here we go. Let's do this. All right. All right. Believe most of you are in. If you are not, the class code is still up there. But as we are doing this, I don't want you to type or do anything. Well, you can't type, but I don't want you to do anything with your screen just yet. Just hands off the screen. I want you to look and see at those four shapes. Which of those four shapes do you think does not belong in the group? And just think about it for about 8 seconds. Just think about it. Don't share it with a neighbor. Think about which one does not belong. Now, you're going to be talking a lot throughout the day, and I'm hoping that your conversation is going to be focused on what we're doing here. I need for you to turn to the person next to you, turn to your group, and share which of the shapes you think does not belong and why. Hopefully you have something that's different than your neighbor. Go ahead. Which one? Which one? What is that called?
Because all of these have doesn't belong. Maybe it's a different thing.
So what is that called?
Oh yeah.
Starts with an H. All right, let's bring it back up here, please. Thank you. Next up, what I need for you all to do is, you've got an X on your screen. Go ahead and drag that X to the one that you feel does not belong. And again, bonus points for anybody who can come up with one that they think the rest of the class is not going to pick, and come up with a reason for doing so. Drag yours over to the one that you think does not belong. All right, bringing you back in 3, 2, 1, done. So, Ms. Jaime, this looks a whole lot like first period, right? It does. So we've got one on the top right, bottom right. Can someone raise their hand and tell me why they think the top right one, about half of you picked the top right. Why does the top right one not belong? Raise your hand. Yeah, go ahead. We good with that? It's the only one that's not a triangle. The rest of them are? We good there? Okay. What other reason might the top right not belong? Gotta have 3 reasons. We got one so far. What are 2 more reasons why the top right one doesn't belong? Go ahead.
Because it doesn't have 3 sides.
It doesn't have 3 sides. Is that the same thing as it's the only one that's not a triangle?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say no, it's not the same thing. It's describing a different characteristic, different quality. So I'll accept that one. I need one more reason why the top right does not belong. Are any of them quadrilaterals? But I like where your head's at. What's another reason why that top right one doesn't belong? You can look at angles. You can look at sides. You can look at all kinds of different things. Yeah, go ahead.
Because they don't all have the same angle as the triangle. Because some have the angles, like the one on the bottom left has an obtuse angle, and the other one has a right.
So this one has obtuse. This one looks like it has a right angle. This one, neither. Acute angles. Whereas this one here, what is this one here? What are all these angles? What do they look like? They all look. We don't know for sure that they are, but do they all look equal? Do they all look congruent? So I would take that. All right, moving on. Let's go down to the bottom right here. How many of you, for those of you who picked bottom right, someone raise your hand. Why does that shape not belong? Again, let's get 3 reasons why this shape does not belong here. Go ahead.
No, dark, no.
Yeah. It's the only one that's darker than the rest. Okay, it's the only one that's gray. The other ones are white. So there's 1. 2 more reasons. Why does the bottom right shape not belong? Say it louder and clear. Someone said it over here.
It's a right angle.
It's a right angle. Do we know for sure that this is a right angle here? No. What would we need for it to make sure that we know that it's a right angle? A little box. Okay, we want to make sure that we've got a little box there, and we're going to talk about that today. And talking about how important it is to have the correct markings. So we've got a right angle. We think that it's the only one that's a right triangle. Any reason why the top left doesn't belong at all? Upside down? I'd take that. Any other reason? Someone from first period said that it's the only one that's an isosceles triangle. Where 2 sides are the same. Do we know for sure that 2 sides are the same?
No.
No? Okay, good. So I want you to be critical inspectors of each of the things that you're doing today. So whatever you see, I want you to be critical of it because you're going to find out that it's not what it looks to be. So we're going to move on. Any reasons why the bottom left doesn't belong? It's only obtuse triangle. Okay. So on your screen now, you have a prompt. The best name for this quadrilateral. And so there it's saying that the classmate thinks that it's a rectangle. Does this look like a rectangle? Okay, so here's what I'm going to tell you. It does not look like a rectangle. But do not trust my drawing. I just went in, I sloppily drew a quadrilateral. And I'm calling this a rectangle. So what you need to do is you need to look at the markings. What do the markings tell you? And this is where your notes are going to come in very helpful. You're going to want to make sure that you look at your notes to be able to see what do these hash marks mean? Okay. Means that sides are congruent. So now taking a look at what you see there, you know that some sides are congruent. What about these little arcs with the hash marks? What do those mean? Angles are congruent. So we have sides congruent, angles congruent. That's what each of those means. So looking at your notes, and we'll do this one together, but first I want you to talk about it with your table. Do you agree that this is a rectangle, or do you disagree that this is a rectangle, and why? So talking about this based on the notes that you have, you may want to turn to the page that's talking about rectangles. Have that conversation. We'll come back as a group and discuss. Go ahead.
They all have to say that they're right. Because it doesn't show the block.
So what are we thinking here, girls? You think that's a rectangle based on what you see? Why not? Don't worry about what it looks like. Remember, I drew this badly. Just looking at the markings. What does it look like based on the markings, not based on how I drew it? All right. So if you have not yet done so, go ahead and start typing in what you think. Do you agree or disagree, and why? A rectangle or not? Remember, don't go off of what you see as far as the drawing. Go off of what you see as far as the markings. What do the markings tell you? Oh, man. All right. So you're going to get a chance to go back to it, but I want to have a conversation about the two responses that you see up here. We've got one of your classmates who agrees, one of your classmates who disagrees. So one of your classmates thinks it's a rectangle because the hash marks show that the opposite sides are congruent. How many of you would agree with that classmate? Because opposite sides are congruent, this is a rectangle. Okay, go ahead and put them down. Now, another classmate disagrees. One of these wrong. You can't have an agree and disagree. Thinks it's a rhombus because they can have sides and angles. So we've got one that thinks it's a rhombus. One of them thinks that it's a rectangle. If I go back to the actual prompt and see what it is that I have, I'll go ahead and show it here. What do we know about rectangles? Has four sides. What else do we know about rectangles? All four angles are right angles. But in this case, do we know anything about the angles of here? We don't know anything about them. Again, don't look at the way that it's drawn. Look at just the markings. So could these all be right angles? Yeah. Do they look like right angles?
Yes.
That looks like a right angle?
No.
Nah. But we're not going off of what we see, we're going off of just the marking. So we don't know for sure anything about the angles on the outsides or in the corners. All we know is some stuff that's happening here. What do we know about these two angles? They're congruent. Okay. Now, let's think about this. These two angles are congruent, and these two angles form a straight line. What do these angles have to add up to? 180. And what are those two angles called? What's the relationship? Supplementary. Good. So we're falling back on some things that we've already learned. We know that those two angles have to add up to 180. And what do we also know about those two angles based on the markings? They're congruent, which means that they starts with an E. Equal. Okay? Equal in size and shape. So if we know that they're equal and they add up to 180, what do each of those angles have to be? 90 degrees. So I know that this is 90 degrees and this is 90 degrees. Take a look at the definition or one of the characteristics of a rhombus for me. So you have it in your notes. What are the characteristics of a rhombus? All sides are equal. So now, here's something that we know. We know that this side is equal to this side. Right? We're good there? We know that this side is equal to this side. Are we good there? Do we know that all four sides are the same?
No.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know for sure. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just trying to ask. We don't know for sure, but we do know that the opposite sides are congruent. Okay. What else do we know about a rhombus? Diagonals bisect each other. And what about the angles of the diagonals? They're perpendicular. What does perpendicular mean? 90 degrees. So unfortunately, those of you that said that this is a rectangle, it is not a rectangle. Those of you who said that this is a rhombus, give yourself a little pat on the back. This is a rhombus. Okay? So that is what we're doing. We're going through and we're trying to look and see those key clues about the different size and angles. So this next one, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up to where you can go through some of these next ones on your own. But this one here, it says that it's a square. Looking at what you have, and you've got some notes about what a square is. You've got some notes talking through, do you agree that this is a square? Do you disagree? Do you think it's something, or do you think that it could be something else? Having a conversation about this with your partners. And then moving on. Again, I'm going to open this up to where it's student-paced. You'll see in the bottom left, as soon as I open it up, you'll see in the bottom left that there's going to be some left and right arrows. Once I open it up for student-paced, feel free to move ahead and continue on with other ones. Or if you get stuck, feel free to try a different one. But what I want you to make sure that you're doing is talking about what you see. Okay, having math-based conversation. Using those academic vocabulary words that you were learning yesterday, the day before, and earlier on. Like you already were able to pull back supplementary and congruent. I love that. I want to make sure that we continue building on that. So, first one, having that conversation about whether or not you think this is a square. And then in the bottom left, you'll see an arrow pop up to where you can actually move ahead or behind as you see fit. Okay? So, is that a square? Agree or disagree, and then typing in the response. Go ahead, working with your partners on this. Who's Oscar? Gray sweatshirt? You object. Why do you object? Why do you object?
Because all four sides of a square would have to be congruent.
Do we know that they're congruent?
We don't. It doesn't have any other tick marks.
Right. So do we know that they're not congruent?
We don't know that.
So it might be a square.
It might be.
Unless there's more information that confirms. What do we think? Do we think this is a square?
No.
Could it be a square? Does it look like a square? Just physically, does it look like a square? No, but remember, I didn't draw these correctly. So based on the markings, could it be a square? But is that the best name for it? Okay, what do those arrows mean? Those arrows don't mean congruent, they mean something else.
It's not a rhombus.
No, the sides.
Or sorry, the sides. What do the arrows on the sides mean?
So it's congruent.
It doesn't mean congruent.
Opposite angles are congruent.
So the little hash marks are going to mean that the lengths are the same. The arrows mean something else.
It is a square.
And that should also be in your notes. It's given to you throughout. So you should be able to see different markings on your paper. Those arrows tell me that it starts with a P. Okay, so let's go back to the Pear Deck there and just typing in stuff that you see there. All right. I'm not going to pause your screen this time. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring to attention some of the things that I'm seeing typed up on the screen. Is I see that some of you are saying that I agree, it could be a square. And then I've got a bunch of you saying I disagree, I object. Both of you are right. And this is the weird part. It's the way that you qualify it, not a circle. I'm not trying to trick you. So the first person that I mentioned says it could be a square, which you're right. Because what do these little arrows tell you? It's not congruent, it's parallel. So let me redraw this to where it would actually be something decent. So do those look parallel?
Yes.
They look more parallel than this nonsense, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go ahead and just mark that. So we're good so far? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and fill the rest of this in. And then what do these things tell me? The angles are what? Congruent. So these angles are congruent. Now, did this make sense? No. Because is this angle the same as this angle? No. Now, a while ago, you learned about something called parallel lines and transversals. When I've got two parallel lines, and we've got this, do we know remember the relationship between these two? What these two are called? Inside, interior angles. Starts with a C. Complementary. Consecutive angles. Okay. When we have consecutive angles, what do we know that they have to add up to? Not 90. 180. So we know that this plus this has to equal 180. But what do we know about them again? They're congruent. They're the same. So what do we know those angles have to be? 90 degrees. Are we good there so far? So we know that they have to be 90 degrees. Which means the person who said that this could be a square could be right. Because this is all I know. So I could have this be a 5-inch side, this be a 5-inch side, this be a 5-inch side, and draw myself a 5-inch side, and now I've got a square. However, do we know that these two sides are congruent? Nope. So could I also have this? Remember, I have not drawn the original shape correctly. You're just going off the markings that you see. I know we haven't talked about this yet in this class. You're going to talk about this later. What kind of shape is this? It's not a square. What shape do you see? I'm not trying to trick you. What shape do you see? It starts with a T. It's not a triangle. It is a trapezoid. I mean, I guess I could see a triangle right here smiling at you, but no. It is a trapezoid. So this could be a square. This could be a rectangle. It could also be a trapezoid. So what we can say, your classmate thought this was a square. Could your classmate be correct? Yes. But is the best name for this a square? No. Because we don't know for sure based on the information that we have. So that would be the thing that I would be talking to my classmate or typing out to my classmate, is that we don't know for sure that this is a square because of the information that we have provided. We know that the opposite sides are parallel. We know that consecutive angles are congruent. But we don't know for sure that it is a square. So now I'm going to turn on the student pacing. Down in the bottom left, you should see some left and right arrows. Go ahead and click the next arrow over. And again, I need for you and your partner, you and your table group, to have the conversation of if you think that that shape is a rhombus based on what you see. So looking through your notes, is that a rhombus? Once you're done, or if you get stuck on it, move on to the next one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if I can get you to come back to me here. Thank you. So you've had some really good conversation, and what I like is that you are no longer trusting my drawings. I know we just met, but I'm not a very good artist. So I rely heavily on the ability to put the correct markings there. And that's what I want you to be critical about. When you see a prompt, when you see something on a homework assignment or a test, a quiz, whatever it may be, that you're critical of what it actually looks like and making sure that you see the markings and that be the thing that tells you. For example, these two arrows here at the top and the bottom, what do the arrows tell you? It's parallel. Okay. So because we know that it's parallel, and because, what do these other markings tell you? They're congruent. I'd like for you to try to draw something that is not a rectangle with just those characteristics. You can't do it. If the top and the bottom both have the same side length and they're parallel, it has to be a rectangle. You can't draw anything other than. Now, you can be more specific and you can draw a square, but a square is just a different type of rectangle. Okay. So based on those markings alone, that's what you should have. Some of you were able to get to this one here, which is good. But what I need for each of you to do now is to jump ahead to this slide, and I believe it's slide 10. Slide 9? Okay. So if you can go back to slide 9, or go up to slide 9, you've got some characteristics of rectangles. I'm going to tell you right now, this is a rectangle. I have drawn this one correctly. What do you know? And don't tell me out loud. I want you to talk about this with your partners, but just to have this conversation, what do you know about the diagonals of a rectangle? That's going to help you immensely to be able to answer this question. You're trying to find what the value of x is, but in that, I want you to have a conversation about what do you know that happens between the diagonals of a rectangle. That's going to help you out in order to be able to answer that question. Go ahead and try to answer that question. Talk about it, answer that question, and there's a couple more after that I need for you to also attempt. Go ahead. It may help to look in your notes about rectangles and the diagonals. So what does that mean?
That they're all equal.
So does that help you be able to figure out what x is now?
Yes. Because it'll be 90, right?
It won't be 90. You just said that they bisect each other and that they are equal. Right? So what does that do for me with that prompt? What can I do now?
They'll equal each other?
They're equal each other. So if we know that they bisect each other and that they're equal, what can we do with those two expressions?
I know, it's like my hair is like
So what do we know about the diagonals of a rectangle? They're congruent. So what does that tell me about these two? Right? What's another way that we can say congruent? They're what? They're equal. So what can I do to find out x? No. You just told me that they are equal. Do that, and you got the answer. That's the happy dance. So, what do I know about 8x minus 7 and 3x plus 8? Equal. So I can set them equal to each other and figure out what x is.